Voice of San Diego podcasts are sponsored in part by Ideate High. Ideate High, an urban discovery school, is San Diego's design thinking high school. It aims to develop community-minded students who are ready to lead our global society. At Ideate, students are prepared for college and career through internships, college coursework, and community-focused problem solving. Come to an open house to learn more about the school. Details are available at ideatehighacademy.com.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice San Diego podcast. It is Mayor Kevin Faulconer's mother's favorite podcast. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Voice San Diego. I'm joined, as always, by assistant editor Andrew Keats. What's up, my man?
How are you? Happy to be here.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's do it.
We are not joined by Sarah Libby. She is out this week, taking care of things. We've got a great show. We got the future of Old Town is actually maybe interesting.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I consider it Old Town. I mean, it is, but I don't. It's just not what I think of when I think of Old Town.
Well, you think of the state park.
And basically only the state park and
right.
The housing right around it.
Right. But there is that area.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of Point Loma as an arm, that would be the pit of it.
Yeah, and then the main area is the torso.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So that area, the pit, as you will, you might describe as that little area. You can go under the freeway. Mm-hmm. You can park if you're going to take the trolley. Mm-hmm. That area is not nice. It's not good. And there's Spay War nearby. I saw a presentation with the captain of the submarine base for the Navy, Captain Dixon, great guy from Wyoming.
Okay. Got a lot of anything else? What else do you know about Captain Dixon?
Captain Dixon.
Okay.
He was describing how there's not an ideal workflow in the old Spay War building, so they want to redevelop the whole thing. So we have got some news for you.
Yes, I met with, just before taping this, I met with Mayor Kevin Faulconer and Hassan Akrada, the director of SANDAG.
And the mayor's mother.
I did get to meet the mayor's mother in the lobby and outside the
so
elevators.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, Mrs. Faulconer.
And they explained to me their plan that they're going to put to the Navy later this month to take over that Spay War property.
Don't spoil it.
Okay, we'll get to it.
Hold it there.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We also have some news in the mayor's race. Of course, our heroes and goats of the week. Let's do some news of the week, though. The city of San Diego became the largest of California cities to ban restaurants and stores from using plastic foam food containers and giving out plastic straws or utensils unless customers ask for them. So that happened, and
what do we think about
it? We
it?
okay with that? It sounded like Rye wrote a perfectly innocuous story about how there was some concerns among some of the city council members about what some of the low-income neighborhoods and some of their small businesses, how they might deal with that. And
yeah, it was basically some of the representatives from lower-income areas said that the restaurants in their area, the small business in their area, would be less able to handle the cost burden associated with switching to alternatives. And Monica Montgomery, Councilwoman Monica Montgomery, had an interesting quote. She said, I think the environmental community needs to do a better job of reaching out to my community, which was interesting.
We described that as tension, but tension doesn't necessarily have to be like there's a huge negative implication. Yeah. And there's some people who took issue with
some pushback, claims that we were setting up a Dems in disarray narrative, which whoever the guy who first wrote that Dems in disarray article, probably some Politico writer in like 2009, has done a
more
grave,
like 2005, I think,
a grave disservice to political journalism nationwide. You can't ever identify any dissent between two Democratic officials without somebody accusing you of perpetuating an unfounded Dems in disarray narrative.
Hashtag Dems in disarray. On Christmas Eve, a local judge gave the county of San Diego a lump of coal. He handcuffed county supervisor's ability to. Did you see that? That's a gift. Yeah. handcuffed county supervisors' ability to approve new housing in rural parts of the county. Like all governments in California, the county is required to curb and use all of its power to curb the region's contribution to climate change. And the judge basically said, you haven't done that. And so all of these housing projects you've approved and all the ones you're going to approve, you probably need to stop and until you have a plan that really shows how they don't contribute to exacerbating climate change and carbon emissions.
Yeah, so Rye wrote a story about this too. I think he captured my perspective from a bystander. I've covered this a little bit before Rye took over the beat. And it's just every one of these rulings, whenever a judge has been asked to finally rule on this series of lawsuits involving the county's general plan and climate action plan, it's just been a scathing, one-sided indictment of their refusal to follow directions. Yeah. And they never change course. It's astounding to watch. They just always act as though nothing's happened. And I even get pushback from people in the county that are like, why are you picking on us? It's like, I'm not the judge.
I'm not the judge.
That guy in the black dress is the one with whom you should take exception.
County supervisors decided that rather than adjust their plan, they are going to appeal. So keep on keeping on, keep going.
Doing this.
The city of San Diego spent 40% more last year. Lisa Halberstadt did this week. Last year on homelessness issues compared to the year before. They put up 3 shelter tents, allowed homeless San Diegos living in cars to park in safe lots. They opened a storage center where people could keep their belongings even if they lived in the streets. And then, of course, they rushed to buy an indoor skydiving facility. Now, the skydiving facility has not had any impact on local homelessness yet because it's still a skydiving facility.
Well, it's not a skydiving facility. It's still an empty building within which there are skydiving chambers.
Yeah, ready. Still ready.
Yeah.
It's still ready. I wonder if they could raise some money just by opening it up for a few days. And
you know what would be a good business plan? If you could skydive inside.
Yeah.
Maybe the city could run that as like a little side business.
Right.
Drum up some revenue. Yeah. I don't know. Do we have any local investors who'd be willing to get in on that business? Like David Malcolm?
Low blow, Andy. It obviously didn't work. I don't know.
We're producers asking us to clarify that joke. I'm thinking maybe it'd be better if we didn't.
Leave that. All right.
Just leave it.
Okay, we have a race. Assemblyman Todd Gloria became the second candidate to declare he wants to be San Diego's next mayor. He's touting his experience as once having been interim mayor. And my favorite story about that, of course, is that there's no such thing as interim mayor.
So this is the second time you've mentioned that there's no such thing as interim mayor.
Yeah.
You did it at our live recording.
That was
just
your
introduction,
joke, yeah.
which was a good joke.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you think it's interesting. I'll recall that when he appointed himself an interim mayor, I proposed that we do a story about the fact that there's no such thing as interim mayor. And you were like, nah, that's not a story.
No, that's not true.
It is.
That's not true.
You were like, if he wants to be it and other people want to take exception, they can. But and I was like, I'm looking at the charter. No such, doesn't say interim mayor anywhere.
You should have done that story. Sometimes I'm wrong.
Anyway, he did it.
Have you ever noticed
he did a good job
I'm wrong?
as interim mayor.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, the council president does take some of the responsibilities of a fallen mayor.
Yeah.
But after Mayor Bob Filner resigned, he and the city attorney and others just kind of decided we need some strength and continuity and.
Well, they really did stuff. It was not like a caretaker role.
No, he's like, I'm interim mayor.
The mayor. Yeah, exactly. The one I always will remember is that whatever happens with this race, the downtown Central Library, the nicest thing the city of San Diego has built in many years, has a plaque outside dedicated by the mayor at the time, Todd Gloria.
Todd Gloria. It does
be there forever.
It does say interim mayor Todd Gloria, and it was featured in his video. Gloria, like Barbara Bree, who announced her candidacy before him, released a video, and we've watched the videos, so you don't have to. I think they say something. It's more than just early campaign coverage. These videos do say something about San Diego politics and public policy.
I think it's like they're little clues about how they're going to frame their races and where they see there being some sort of salience.
How they've read the electorate. Yeah, exactly. So now both of them start with their hardships. None of these videos for candidates ever start with like, my dad was the richest.
or just like, I had a pretty unexceptional upbringing.
Yeah,
middle class
things went really well.
family.
It's very supportive parents.
We never wanted for anything. No, that's sad. We're making light of it. These people did have their, humble beginnings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So here was Bree's version of that.
I grew up outside of Philadelphia. My parents got divorced when I was a teenager. My mother went to work full-time at a job where she was paid less than the comparable men, and there was nothing she could do about it. She went out to...
Okay. All right. A little gender inequity. All right. And here was Todd Gloria's version.
Made in a gardener. I get asked all the time, what are you? I'm a lot of things. Latino, Native American, Filipino, gay. But most of all, I'm a third-generation San Diegan. I didn't come from privilege. I came from grandparents affected by racism, but undeterred by it.
Okay, so hold on. Bree did check her privilege at the end of the video.
She did. What'd you say?
Well, here you go.
In San Diego. I was a white woman with a Harvard MBA, so I had a lot of doors that were open to me that are not open to a lot of people in San Diego. And I want to make sure they get the same opportunities that I had.
The music is good.
Yeah.
Both the style of both these videos is very different. Barbara's music until that moment was really like upbeat, and Todd's was more like, oh man, mellow, which isn't. It's like it's not quite his personality. He's not very mellow.
No, he's a very energetic person to be around.
Yeah.
But
the whole thing was very contemplative, like him looking out at things, waiting for the trolley to come, stuff like that. Okay, so that's the...
And very realistic that he was waiting for the trolley.
Yeah.
Waiting a long time for the trolley. Waiting and waiting.
He's just sitting there waiting. Sits down with his hands, just pondering.
Just an entire 20-minute video between trolley pickups. Just like, well, I didn't want to misrepresent the way public transportation is in this county, so
and some security guard comes and asks him for his ticket.
I had to wait in front of a bus stop with no shelter for a very long time.
Okay. All right. So that was the style. The substance, though, the energy level is one thing. I think again, Barbara's was more energetic and stuff, but the way they talked about the substance and the issues that they want to prioritize, I think really was revealing. So let's get into what Barbara Bree did. She had already established, and she did in the video, she said, I already ran, and this is what I ran on, which I guess she was saying is what she's going to run on coming up.
Ran on the importance of keeping our community safe, clean, and prosperous, on the importance of figuring out our issues with police recruitment and retention, and in expanding the innovation economy.
All right, and so notice she didn't talk about housing or homelessness. Actually, not a word about that in the video.
No mention of housing.
No. Okay, so Gloria spoke right to us first. I think literally you and me and Rye Rivard.
That's it.
When he did this shout out to the city's motto.
San Diego may be America's finest city, but we should strive to be more than just fine. Right now,
this is Rivard's point he's always making about the finest city being kind of an odd thing to say. It's fine. It's a fine city.
Yeah.
Go a little better, maybe. A little more aspirational.
Yeah. So I always say that I'm from Baltimore, Charm City.
That
like I can't help but feel like when a realtor lists a very small house for sale and they can't find a nice way to describe it, they refer to it as charming.
Yeah.
And so
then he goes fine.
Charm City has always felt like a backhanded compliment, and I think finest city kind of works the same way.
It's fine. It's fine city. Okay, so here was Gloria's priorities, a little bit different than Bree's.
Right now, housing that people can afford is more out of reach than ever. Every day, it seems there are more homeless people on the street without real solutions to help them. And if we don't move quickly to combat climate change, our children and grandchildren won't know the San Diego we all love. It's clear that we need
so
leadership.
Housing, climate change, homelessness,
transportation.
Yeah. So I would give Bree a point on the energy and video quality.
Mm-hmm.
I would give Gloria the point on the substance, something that the city can actually work with. Now, I'm not sure the city can solve climate change, but obviously, like housing and homelessness probably should tackle. I think when you look at like the, support the innovation economy. I mean, we can build good roads to make sure they can get there. It's a little bit less direct. It's like, and then the education stuff. I'm still going to wait for her to actually say like, all right, what do you really mean? It's not just supporting San Diego State.
Todd did mention in his video schools. No one takes a chance to talk to voters without mentioning schools.
Did he?
Yeah,
I didn't hear that.
He said things people care about in their neighborhoods, like good schools.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody's always going to talk about schools, and we're just going to have to learn to live with that fact, I think.
That's fine. I'm fine. I'm glad they do. They're gonna have to learn to live with the fact that I'm gonna always ask them like, what?
Yeah.
So what?
So you guys can have that conversation. I'm gonna sit back and recognize that everyone's always going to talk about schools, and the city's never going to get involved in schools.
Never.
And it's just going to be this
my
conversations floating past people.
All right. All right, so we now have the outlines of the race.
Well, at least between two people. Scott Peters not in it yet.
Well, he formed a committee.
An exploratory committee.
Okay, so what do we think the chances are he gets in?
90?
Yeah, I think it's probably
pretty
really
high.
likely.
It would count as a big surprise if he didn't, right?
Yeah.
Now, so yeah.
Do you think he'll have a video? What do you think his hardship part will be?
Duke isn't even an Ivy League school. Graduated from Duke.
Yeah. His dad, I bet you the first line.
I actually take that back because I don't know enough about his background.
No, his first line, I guarantee you, will be his father was a civil rights activist and minister. I bet you that's one of the first 10 lines.
Interesting. I didn't know that about him.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be something that he should tell people.
Right.
Well, so I've been thinking about this race a lot lately. I've been talking to a lot of City Hall types about it. And I really just don't know how the race is going to take shape. Because Bree, Gloria, and Scott you would typically say that they come from the same Democratic constituencies. There's no obvious lines between them that you would say, oh, okay, this person will get labor, this person will get the business groups, the Democratic leaning business groups or whatever. So I don't have a great feel for how they'll break up the constituencies during the early part of the race before you start talking to voters directly, when you're chasing fundraisers and lining up endorsements and that sort of thing. The first act of the race. I just don't know how it's going to go.
So
I really don't.
I think that these videos are actually indicative of how they might do that.
Mm-hmm.
In that, I don't think it's an accident that she didn't mention housing in there.
Yeah.
I think that she's going to really attract and try to go after the group of San Diegans who are like, this is a great place because it's not that big, and we should preserve what we love about it and just make sure it's more fair for people within it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that, and
the line I've heard from a handful of people often is stop worrying about making San Diego bigger and start making it better.
Exactly. And then Gloria's angle is going to be like, it's literally not possible to live and work here.
Yeah.
And there needs to be big fundamental changes to it. And look at these big problems.
Where does Scott fit into that?
And Scott's going to be like, hey, I'm good at managing.
Well, Scott really has positioned himself as like an urbanist for the last few years.
It's true. It's true.
He's he talks about parking, the effects of parking minimums. When the YIMBY from San Francisco came down to have like a workshop, he attended by himself, I was told, not even with a staffer, and was an active participant. Todd Gloria last night went to the YIMBY Dems group. So like on the first day of his campaign, he was there talking to that pro-housing organization. So yeah, I don't, but...
So
well, and
housing
then I think,
housing and vacation rentals, that sort of thing is going to be like a big deal.
Well, and then the other interesting thing revealed is that Barbara was so adamant about pensions.
Yeah.
That she brought up pensions. I don't think that's going to be something that unions are going to be excited to talk about again in another mayoral race.
Yeah, or are they going to take a more cynical, like, whatever you have to do to hurt him?
Sure. Well, and we should also say here that unions could go a bunch of different ways.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a lot of different groups.
And as they always remind us, they're not a monolithic group.
Sure. But, I mean, even beyond that, it really is true. MEA could go one way, and building trades or UFCW another. The MEA, the white-collar union in City Hall that is most affected by pension reform, I don't think they're going to be excited about Barbara Bree clearly directing these statements at Scott Peters for his old pension votes.
Right.
Even though that's kind of a settled issue, I just don't think they're going to want to kick it back up again.
Well, and then on the right, there is this primary. Everybody's waiting to see if somebody from the right emerges as a candidate,
and presumably someone will, right?
I'm sure that there will be somebody who comes in. Now, whether they have the resources and recognition to be a prominent candidate, I'm not sure. But there will be people like Peters who are going to try to get, like, the Lincoln Club and some other conservative coalitions to support him as the business-friendly, pro-trade, that kind of thing. Build businesses, maybe hold back on some of the regulations type things. So we'll see who wins that sort of elite primary.
One thing I want to say about Barbara Bree that makes me turns my attention to her race is that she's so decisive, and that I think if you took their names away and just called them candidate 1, candidate 2, candidate 3, and looked only at their resumes, I would think of Barbara Bree as a considerably less competitive candidate than Scott or Todd. She's just been in government for far less long, and therefore has fewer accomplishments to point to or experience to point to. But there's something about her being so willing to get in, so quickly, moving so assertively to get in, that just makes me think, well, she must have a reason. There must be something that's going to stick around from this. Contrast that with Todd Gloria last time around, when a lot of people were waiting for him to get into the race. He didn't. Might have had a good chance. There's just something that I read about her actions that makes me think that she'll be a candidate that you have to take very seriously.
Well, and make no mistake, her resume is strong especially
and
within
non-government stuff, right?
Especially within the professional network around UC San Diego.
Yeah.
I mean, that is she is always at the top of the list of somebody they want to put in charge of whatever new nonprofit or something somebody's including Voice of San Diego. She was the founding editor and CEO of this organization, helped recruit me, and left 2005, so that's when I took over in 2005. So, by the way, I don't have a dog in the race. I'm not a preference of any kind, but yeah, that's part of, I think, what's gonna drive that network is not small, and it will have some money, and it will help her get into that next tier.
Well, and both her and Congressman Peters also have personal wealth that they can draw upon.
Absolutely. All right, so we are going to talk about the future of that Old Town campus of the Navy and our hero and goat of the week. Stay tuned if you're on the podcast. We are back. All right, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to the mayor's office. You're talking to the folks. And they tell you something. What's up?
Right. That's correct. I was talking to the folks, and they told. No, I had a meeting with Mayor Faulconer and Hassan Akrada, the new director at SANDAG, and they kind of spelled out for me their plan, which is that the Navy is currently asking anyone, mostly private industry, but anyone, for ideas for what they should do to redevelop that large Spey-War area.
Yeah, it's an old manufacturing plant for
fighter jets in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't need that space, the space that isn't really good for the types of work they do now.
It's not an ideal workflow, as the captain described.
Right, exactly.
It's not very nice.
My wife worked
there for a year. It's a little rough.
Yeah. So, Spey-War is it's a cyber warfare arm of the Navy, basically. So they're asking for what they should do. It's like 70 acres of property, and it's basically split across 2 different sites, bisected by Pacific Coast Highway. If you drive by the 5, you've certainly seen it. That large metal warehouse-looking facility.
It's a big building.
Yes. So the SANDAG and the city of San Diego's idea that they're going to pitch to the Navy at the end of this month, when for the deadline, is to some of the details aren't sorted out yet, but take over the property and use it as the basis of this new transit hub to the airport. So they would build the Navy a new headquarters for SPAWAR. The Navy's pretty open to how that would happen. They have some specifications for how much space they need, and they want it to be state-of-the-art and nice, but they could even have it other locations. If you had other land that you would give them, they would be open to that, they said. But I think they would probably keep that on the southern portion of the Pacific Highway, and then the northern portion, which abuts right into the Old Town Transit Station. They would combine that Old Town Transit Station with this new airport transit facility. They call it Grand Central, San Diego Grand Central. And basically that's their idea. So the coaster would go there, the trolley would go there, the buses would go there. They would open it up for private development. So they would build houses and office space and retail space all along this area. The ground leases and revenue from that and these public-private partnerships would help pay for the whole thing. They've proposed tunneling underneath the Naval Base Point Loma and the airstrip, basically.
Boring, if you will.
Yes, they were in L.A. earlier this week meeting with the boring company about this very thing. And that's how it would connect to the airport, although they specified that they're looking at above ground solutions also, but they are considering below ground because it's a more direct shot from there. You don't have to go all the way around. And so that's the idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big idea. Let me ask you this.
So now there's no guarantee that the Navy says yes.
Of course.
And the Navy's a big dog, right? It's one of the wealthiest organizations in the history of civilization. But I think there would be pressure on them to accept a public bid like this over alternatives that'll most likely be private industries.
Yeah. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that one of the most significant things that Kevin Faulconer has done as mayor is block the appointment of the SANDAG number 2 to become the chief executive of the SANDAG, to pave the way for this guy, Hassan Akrata, who now is laying the groundwork for really big things like this that he's now partnered with the mayor on?
Can I give you an insufferable response?
As always.
I think there's too much narrative making there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any. I don't know that if they had hired Kim Kawada that she wouldn't pursue something like this. Maybe she wouldn't, but I don't know that. And also, nothing's happened yet.
Yeah.
So it might be too big a deal to to award this that sort of a claim.
Did you? I assume you asked him, like, "Hey, have you talked about money?"
Yes. Yes. They said we're not going to get there yet.
Oh, okay.
Let us sketch out the vision. Now, they did say in LA the airlines paid for roughly paying for roughly 60% of this, and the rest of the money is coming from public hands. So, the vision I got for it, and these numbers are a complete fabrication, but the airlines through the airport will pay for some portion of this. Some portion of this will be paid for by developing the rest of the property through these public-private partnership ground leases. And then Hassan Akrata did say, look, SANDAG's going to pay something. Mm-hmm. So some of it's going to come from either existing Transnet funds, a new MTS ballot measure, or which is already in the works, or a SANDAG ballot measure down the line, or maybe some other public funds. But it's going to be a hodgepodge of different financial sources.
Are we going to call it Grand Central San Diego, or are we going to stick with the better obviously audience tested intermodal transit center, ITC.
I think they've retired ITC.
ITC is out.
I think so.
Did we kill ITC?
Well, some of the pictures I've seen show like, here's where we thought we were going to have the ITC project, but here's the Grand Central project. So they're like treating them as two.
Can you help me understand why we need, like, I understand the airport connection, but you could just do that straight over to Old Town right now. Like, what's the need for an ITC? What's happening there? Just kind of a place you can like go and get a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's like if you've driven up through Anaheim recently, you see that giant, looks like a spaceship. They're like transit hub that cost an awful lot of money, but they have all the different rail lines run through there, and that's kind of their big thing. I don't know. That's what they want.
What happens to Santa Fe Depot? Is that just still a depot?
Santa Fe Depot is, what do you mean?
That feels like the real Grand Central.
Yeah, it does. It's awfully small though.
Yeah, it's not big.
Yeah, I think that's being redeveloped right now too.
Is it?
There's plans kicking around for a redevelopment.
All right. Well,
it's a beautiful building. I love the inside of Santa Fe Depot.
I'm a fan. I feel like it's not getting enough love when we talk about San Diego Grand Central. It's probably a little nervous about its place.
Yeah. Another thing Sonocrata said in the meeting was, we'll have the coaster come through here, but right now the coaster comes once an hour, and we need to get it coming every 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's talk about him.
That is, if the coaster started running every 5 or 10 minutes, that's wild.
Let's talk about him for a sec. So you did spend some time with him, and your story was very interesting to me. So he basically said, like, hey, we're going to do everything. We're going to plan for robot cars. Another thing you're really a big fan of.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about tunnels and Elon Musk, gondolas, hyperloops. Yeah. So what's going on? What is he doing? Is he just saying, like, is he just not letting things hold him back yet? I mean, it's kind of adorable to see him, have all these ideas before he's hit San Diego in the head.
Yeah, it's the type of optimism only a newcomer can have about the city. Yeah. I think that's right. I think he's. I don't know that anybody should take any of those statements to be too definitive. I think he's mostly saying, like, I don't have an ideological predisposition for or against any of these things. It's about building this comprehensive network that works in a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different ways to move around. And so I think that's a better way to read what he's saying rather than like, we're building a hyperloop, you know?
Right. Got it. And so also he's talking about, like, we also need to make sure that there's a viable transit alternative. But if there is, we might start charging people per mile. What are we talking about with that?
Well, so this is something that transit people have talked about for a while, which is that the gas tax is kind of a proxy for what you're really trying to do, which is what people would prefer is a user fee.
Right.
Where you are charged commensurate with how much you use the roads.
If you drive a lot, you should pay for the roads.
Yeah, and the gas tax is kind of a backdoor way into that, but it's becoming less and less effective as more and more people move towards electric cars. Mm-hmm. So if the fleet of cars on America's roads became 100% electric, then the amount of dollars we would collect through gas taxes would be zero.
That's true, because there's no gas.
Yes, and so it would not be a good way to fund our transportation improvements with $0.
So would you have like a meter reader look at your odometer?
I think they don't really know exactly how they're going to do it right now, and it would have to happen at the federal level. There's different studies going on. There's a bunch of different things in the works, but if you wanted tomorrow to switch towards vehicle miles traveled fee, you couldn't do it.
Okay.
But maybe through GPS or something like that, you could at some point do you run a meter basically.
But the policy-based part of this discussion is that normally SANDAG does a special regional transportation plan every 5 years for the next 40 years. So basically says, for this 40 years, this is what we're going to do. And then 5 years, it can update.
It updates it, right.
And so what's happening now, they're not going to do that in 2020. Are they going to get like fined or anything?
So yeah, they'll technically enter into a probationary period, basically, where they're due for a new plan at the end of this year. They've already acknowledged that they're not going to be able to do that. They're too far behind schedule, largely because of the scandal. They spent so much time dealing with that they had staffers working on that instead of working on their new plan. So they've delayed that. They're not going to adopt a new plan until early 2020, which will be late. While they're out of date, they won't be eligible for federal funds. So their plan is to essentially fast forward any requests that might have landed during that however many months that they won't have an updated plan, and they'll try to get it ahead of time, or they'll try to push it back until when they actually adopt one. So they will adopt one. That's kind of boring bureaucratic stuff, though. But what he also said is that plan is basically just going to be a refresh of the plan from 5 years ago. It's not going to be any big changes. You're not going to see any wild new visions in that. But he is going to try to sketch out a new big vision that's much more bold and visionary than the previous one. But he knows he won't be able to do that on this timeline that they're already working on. So he'll do that through an amendment. So basically, you have to adopt a new plan every 5 years, but there's nothing that says that you can't amend it whenever you want. So he'll adopt this pro forma update in early 2020, and then when they finish this process of outlining what he'd like the region's transportation network to look like, they'll do that through an update.
All right, so just to be clarify here what's going on. We're talking about the San Diego Association of Governments, and it is overseen by a board of directors represented by all the different cities in the region, with, of course, the big dog, the city of San Diego, having a big weighted vote on there. Now, one last point I wanted to go over is that board of directors is now going through a big change. So we talked about Sam Abed, the mayor of Escondido. He lost his election. He's no longer on that board. Ron Morrison, the former mayor of National City, no longer on that board. Now we heard this week, Jesse Marks reported that in Carlsbad, the City Council of Carlsbad has chosen a different representative to SANDAG's board of directors that is not the mayor, Matt Hall.
Yeah. So progressives in town will have an opportunity to direct this board as they please. Now, it might become a be careful what you wish for, you might just get it situation. Where they have
Dems in disarray.
Sure. No, where they have to shoulder the burden of making decisions that may not be all that popular. I mean, one issue that transit advocates all around the country deal with is that the things that they most want to do, like, people really like their cars. It still is the case that whatever one says about climate change, which is obviously real and obviously aided by fossil fuel emissions and traffic, and then the one of the most important ways, especially in California, that you can address it is by getting people to drive less based on where they live, work, and how they get to from home to work. But people still like to drive,
right?
And so they may be in a position of having to take actions that are not altogether popular, or maybe they won't be as bold once they're in charge as they were, or maybe they'll be as bold as they've attempted to be while in the minority, and it won't be that big a deal, and it'll sail through, and everyone will be happy.
Well, that's what to watch. The Dems are in charge of SANDAG. There's a new leader of SANDAG with a lot of big visions and ideals, and we'll see what they are able to do there. All right, our hero of the week. This week's hero are the providers of the sort of emergency shelters that are taking care of a lot of the asylum seekers that the federal government is literally just dropping off in the city of San Diego and county of San Diego after they apply for asylum at the border. And so that's the ACLU, the San Diego Organizing Project, and Jewish Family Services. Not only are they this is different than typical sort of homeless shelter situation. A lot of these folks have people who will help them get their feet on the ground, get established here in other parts of the country, but they have a few days at least to try to get their stuff together here.
It's a very temporary solution.
Right. And so these organizations have stepped up to take care of them. And now it sounds like the county of San Diego, through a rather significant vote this week, The county supervisor Greg Cox and Nathan Fletcher joined together and got the majority of the board to support finding help and shelter support for these organizations to help them keep going and provide that. Last thing we need is more people on the streets and more instability in the border region. And so kudos to them for stepping up and taking care of the situation. And I'm sure they're always looking for support and funds and resources. You can go to ACLU or the San Diego Organizing Project or Jewish Family Services. Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
The city of El Cajon adopted some new dockless scooter regulations. And
it's a good find by Jesse Mark.
These are very reasonable regulations. Nobody was overheated or in any way had just unreasonable. This is reading directly from it. Quote, "It is the finding of this legislative body that pervasive bicycle, scooter, and skateboarding within the city presents a significant threat to the peace, health, and safety of the community. For this reason, it is the intent of this legislative body to limit such activity. It is not the intent of this legislative body to limit the private enjoyment of such activity where it is safe to do so."
Part of me wants to take that first sentence and make like a T-shirt out of it that all the like skaters will wear or something. It is the finding of this legislative body that pervasive bicycle, scooter, and skateboarding. It's like somebody just wanted to throw skateboarding here.
Yeah. There's like they wrote this for a very specific reason, and somebody like raised their hand and was like, "Can we please get skateboarding in there? I've been hating those people for years."
Have you seen them? Yeah. And you can just see the skaters out there with the skateboarding's not a crime. This is like from my youth.
Yes.
Skateboarding, a significant threat to peace, health, and safety of the community. Again, you're right. The regulations they propose are not that big a deal. Like don't ride on the sidewalk, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I was joking. This is absurd.
No, this part is ridiculous.
The regulations themselves, though, were fine. It's just the justification you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't see anything in the regulation. It's just, why did you have to do this?
Yeah.
Like, why do you have to say you want to limit bicycling activity? That's crazy.
Yeah. It also runs counter to the stated goals of the region.
Right. All right. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast. You know, one way you should follow these stories is with our newsletters. We have the Morning Report, of course, most popular product we put out every week. Andy and I combine on the Politics Report, comes out every Saturday. Border Report every other Monday. Culture Report is very popular. Julia Dixon-Evans does that. Rai Rivard does the Environment Report every other Monday. And then the North County Report every other Wednesday. These are great ways to follow those issues if you want to stay in touch with the stories there. It's always easy to miss some stuff, and those reporters never do. So check that out. And there's also a way to follow this show. You can get all of those newsletters at thevoiceofsandiego.org/newsletter. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and editor-in-chief of Voice San Diego. Andy Keats is the assistant editor. The show is produced by Nate John and Adriana Heldies. And thank you, and you'll hear from us next time.